Well, hello, lovely listeners. Welcome to episode 166 of the Assist with Impact podcast, my last episode for 2022. Yes, I'm recording this the week before Christmas, and I am so delighted to bring you a very special final episode for 2022. It is my interview with Jessica Davies, the operations manager for Peter Fuda, who I interviewed in my last episode. Peter Fuda and Jess are based in Sydney, Australia. And if you have not listened to that episode with Peter, you might want to go back and listen to that episode, but you don't have to. You can listen to this episode with Jess and then go back, because although they are a nice little pigeon pair, they are very distinct episodes and they do stand alone. Anyway, let me tell you a little bit about the lovely Jess Davies. Jess has worked with Peter for over 4 years now, commencing in an EA capacity in 4 years ago, around 2018, and subsequently moving into the role of operations manager early in 2022, so early this year. In that capacity, Jess partners with Peter across the three key business streams that Peter has in his world: his consultancy, the alignment partnership, which in this episode and the episode with Peter, you'll hear us refer to as TAP, which is the acronym for the alignment partnership, his leadership app called Enixa, and any speaking engagements that he undertakes, which is the third stream, the third business stream. In the operations manager role, Jess works across account management, project management, marketing, and content creation, always with the intention to amplify Peter's work. Prior to TAP, or the alignment partnership, Jess worked at a Fintech startup in London as the EA to the CEO, and you'll hear her talk about that in this episode and what she went through in adjusting to the difference from working in that environment to coming back and working for Peter. And prior to that role, she held a number of executive assistant and team assistant roles. So I met Jess when I reached out via LinkedIn to connect with Peter. So it was Jess that was the person that I was communicating with. She was managing Peter's LinkedIn profile. And I was immediately impressed with her professionalism and her communication skills. In my interactions with Jess, it was clear that Peter placed enormous value and trust in Jess's commercial and business acumen. And this was articulated by him when I interviewed him in the interview that I did with him. So, just one more reminder to make sure that you listen to that episode. Peter described how Jess has the ability to 10x what he is doing. He described her as a force multiplier. I had already decided that I wanted to invite Jess to be a guest on the podcast, and that recommendation, the way he articulated Jess's value, just cemented it. It was really, honestly, it was a delight to interview somebody like Jess that is an embodiment of the linchpin assistant. In this interview, you will hear how Jess reflects all 5 levels of the linchpin model that I train and teach. Jess speaks about how the culture that Peter has created is one where busyness is not a badge of honour. Instead, effectiveness and creating capacity are capabilities that are encouraged and rewarded. It was a delight, genuinely an absolute delight to interview Jess. I could have talked to her all day and beyond. To hear her just talk about and actually shine a light on herself and the contribution that she makes, and hear her describe the curiosity that she brings to her role, to Peter, to the people that she, the stakeholders that she engages with, her thirst for knowledge, her self-directed learning. It was just an absolute joy. In this final episode of my podcast in 2022, it is a delight to bring you an administrative professional who has just in this role that she is in, truly revealing her leadership capabilities and continuing to grow and develop. Someone who truly represents Enixa, the idea that leadership is not a position, it's a mindset and a tool set. So, just an encouragement to you, if you have not already gone across to Enixa, and the link is in the show notes today, to sign up for your 30-day free trial. And if you're in Australia, what better time to do it now when you've got a bit of downtime over the summer break to do some self-directed learning in enixa.co. Sign up for your 30-day free trial. It's available wherever you are in the world, and the links to connect with Jess will be in the show notes as well. So without any further ado, here is my interview with the wonderful Jessica Davies, Linchpin Assistant, Operations Manager Extraordinaire, and wishing you all a wonderful festive season, safe, healthy, and productive 2023. Hello, I'm Liz Van Vliet, and welcome to the Assist with Impact podcast. Join me as I explore the competencies and capabilities that allow you to assist with impact. I'll be sharing practical tips, strategies, and insights that will help you move beyond what I call the order taker zone and be that little hinge that can swing big doors. If you're ready to be more proactive and have more impact in your role, then this is the place for you. Let's get started with the episode. Well, hello, Jessica Davies. It is so lovely to have you on the Assist with Impact podcast. Thank you for making the time.
Hi, Liz. No, it's great to be speaking with you. Thanks for making the time.
It is an absolute pleasure. And as listeners will have heard in the intro that will accompany this episode, they will already know a little bit about you and why I've invited you to be a guest on the podcast. But just to get started, they will already have heard about the fact that you are Peter Fuda's right-hand person, and you were the person that was instrumental in me being able to get Peter as a guest on the podcast. But what I always love to start the podcast interviews with is to get people to tell me about their experience navigating what I call the career spider frame. And that's what I refer to as, rather than it being a career ladder and us climbing up that greasy pole, it's about the idea of, navigating those sideways moves, sometimes the diagonal moves, sometimes the moves backwards, or even staying in the one spot. But I'd love to hear about your journey on the career spider frame to start with.
Yeah, and I love that you call it the career spider frame, because that's absolutely what it is. I mean, there's so few people that I know that have done a nice straight ladder. If anyone, no one comes to mind. And mine's been very much the same. It's kind of gone from team assistant roles into working with the managing director, back into reception for another company, and jumping from team to team to opportunities that you don't expect or really plan, but all things that along the way really become those stepping stones to opening new doors and new opportunities. So for the past 4 years, I've been working with Peter Fuda. And again, I came in to work with the Alignment Partnership, his management consultancy. I was actually supposed to be working with the partners and working as an EA with them. And then, a few weeks actually into the role, the opportunity opened up to work with Peter directly. So I moved into that position, and then, along the way, as things need to get done, kind of go to the problem, and now I'm working at doing operations manager for Peter across all three of his kind of streams of work that he works in, the consulting, he's got a digital app, and also speaking engagements that he does. So I agree, it's very much the spider frame. And what I find so interesting looking back in thinking in advance of having this conversation with you, you look back and it's just funny how many doors are open through connections. And I always find talking to people about what you want to do and where you want to go, or just what you're interested in, always opens so many things. There's been intros to different companies that I've had just from having a conversation with a friend, and next thing something pops up, or the conversations that I've had with Peter of, I'm kind of interested in this or that, and next thing you know, there's an opportunity. But if you had kind of kept it to yourself, that door wouldn't be open. So I think part of spinning the web, if I stick with the spider frame metaphor, part of spinning that web is really having those conversations and being open about hopes and dreams and where you want to go and things you're interested in trying, rather than having one thing figured out that's the be all and end all, and you can't deviate from that path.
Yeah, I love that. So if we go just in terms of like where you started on the, your first step, climbing onto that climbing frame, did you go to university? No,
I didn't. No, it was funny. It's, you get towards the end of high school and everyone's going to university. You've got your score that you're going to get. That's going to determine the rest of your life. You've got to be going to uni. That was what it felt like. But at the time, I just didn't really know where I wanted to go. I liked the idea of maybe an EA kind of role or something along that path. So I thought, I'll start just doing a bit of admin work. And then once I realized what I'm really passionate about and what I really want to spend my time and energy and funds on at uni, then I can go back and do it. So I actually started in a team assistant role for a transport consultancy company.
That is fascinating.
Yeah.
And that really highlights the fact that this idea of us, we really inculcated, I don't know if inculcated is the right word, but, I've got 3 daughters, and I know with the older 2, when they were finishing school, there was very much this idea of, taking that university being that first step on that career rung, that first rung on the career ladder. So it's so fascinating that right back then you chose intentionally to go in a different direction.
Yeah. And it's interesting. It's daunting at the time, because the conversations when you're at that age are, what are you doing at uni? What uni do you go to? And so you're really thinking, geez, I hope I make the right decision here. I feel this doesn't stunt all my future opportunities. But I'd been quite lucky that, people in my life and people that had come and spoken even at high school and things had sort of said there are plenty of ways to get where you want to be.
Yeah.
So I did feel quite confident in being able to to know that if I wanted to get back and decided that there was something I really wanted to do, I'd always figure out a way to kind of get back there.
Yep. Yep. And that I love this, because you are the epitome of exactly what I'm talking about. And I can so relate to that, too, in terms of my experience, that I never felt like, I've heard a great expression recently, rather than it being all or nothing, it's all or something. And it's, it's being willing to think about, okay, it's not all or nothing. It's not one, it's not that extreme idea of, if I choose this path, then I'm cutting myself off from this path.
Yes.
It's the idea that I'm choosing this path, and it may or may not work out, but I can always backtrack. And that's what I love about the idea of the career spider frame, is that it gives you, there's always choice. And sometimes people don't feel like they have choice.
Absolutely. And I feel particularly lucky in the kind of EA admin side of things, that once you have those first few years of experience kind of under your belt, you really have such a varied skill set that you can take risk, and you can, make choices to try new things, knowing that worst case, there'll always be an admin role that you can really kind of fall back into. It might be a couple of steps back, or it may feel that way.
Yeah.
But you do have that stability of a really great skill set and experience, that if what you're trying doesn't work out, you can fall back on, the skills that you have.
Yeah. So when your early experience in your admin roles, what was the role of training? Was it self-directed? Were you put through courses? What happened there?
Yeah, so early on, I did do a TAFE course at my first role to get that diploma level of certification. And so that was helpful, kind of a nice confidence booster really at the time, to have a little something extra on the resume. But I find, you pick up so much on the job in that kind of role, and it really was, it was a smaller company, so it was great that I did have the opportunity to kind of be involved in a lot. And then a role opened up kind of 6 to 9 months of me being there, and then I was working directly with the MD. So while I did do a little bit of formal training, there was plenty to learn on the job. And then I think at the time, I did want to build, as I said, there was a lot of people at uni, and so you're thinking, am I getting left behind? So I did seek out training myself and go to a few like EA training days and networking events and bits and pieces, just to kind of start making those connections and just seeing what's out there, because at the time I had such a limited frame of reference, given I was early days into the workforce.
Yeah. Fantastic. So now let's move to the current, because obviously listeners will know from the introduction that my introduction to you was when I reached out via LinkedIn to Peter to be, to connect with him, but then to follow up to invite him to be a guest on the podcast. And it was you that was the intermediary and the person that I was communicating with. And you were so, you did such, you blew me away, which I actually have to tell you on the record. So one of the people that I told Peter this when we were chatting, that we have 6 degrees of separation. One of the people that is in sort of Peter's world in the alignment partnership is Cynthia Whelan. From when she was at Telstra, and obviously more recently they've continued to be connected. And when I told her that I was interviewing for the podcast, she was like, "Oh, Jess is the bomb. Jess is so fantastic." So you have it there from one of Peter's clients. Just a testimonial, totally unsolicited, about the contribution that you make in your role at TAP, the Alignment Partnership. For listeners, that's the acronym, isn't it? TAP.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah.
But can you tell the listeners how how you came to work at the Alignment Partnership, and how you've alluded to it, but how you've evolved into doing what you're doing now, because I know listeners will have heard Peter's perspective. He's talked a little bit about it in our interview, but I want to hear from you how you started and how you've stepped through into doing what you're doing now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, thank you so much. That's such lovely feedback. I'm really flattered and blown away. I'm so lucky in this role. I'm working with Peter. We get to work with so many just really incredible, inspirational people who are just doing wonderful things and lovely people to work with. It's just really flattering to hear that the impact is felt. Obviously, we really want to provide an excellent service, and I try to bring that into every interaction that I go through. So I'm really blown away. Thank you. And sorry if you can hear that siren in the background now.
Oh no, don't be silly. Well, look, I genuinely, Cynthia was so excited that I was going to be having you on the podcast. She said, forget Peter, you need to talk to Jess, which is exactly what Peter said to me. Wow. And listeners will will have heard that as well. So, okay, so tell me, how did you end up at the Alignment Partnership?
So, like I said, I've been kind of bouncing around from different roles here and there. And then I got to this point where I thought I really want to try and do a move over to the UK. This is going back a bit.
Yeah.
But I wanted to do the UK. That was on my, bucket list of things to do. So I went and did that. While I was there, I was working at a startup company. They were a Fintech company. So it was really fast-paced, long hours, just a really exciting time. And then I did a couple of years there and got to the point where, I was ready to come back to Australia and kind of come home, be around family and friends again. And so I actually started working at the Alignment Partnership when I got back from the UK. This is my first job back in Sydney. Coming back at the time, I was hounding recruiters and chasing, trying to make sure I had something for when I got back, because I'd been traveling and spent all my money. So as I said, I started at TAP. I was going to be an EA with the partners here. And then a few weeks after I'd started, I had the opportunity to then start working with Peter, just as the person that was in that role left. So then I was working with Peter as his EA.
Yeah.
And so it started very much as a typical EA role in terms of diary management, correspondence, that kind of thing. What was really interesting coming from the startup world that I'd just been in, of, chaos and excitement, and we're working around the clock and following every opportunity that pops up with, anything that's an opportunity to make money, we're doing it all, chasing all the leads. And then coming into the Alignment Partnership, coming to TAP, that's very established and, a management consultancy. They practice what they preach. So it was just a very calm role, and it was such a contrast to what I'd come from. And so it was very interesting. I remember actually having a conversation with Peter when I first started. And, Peter's one of the most organised people I've ever met. So coming in to be the EA to get his life organised, I'm thinking, what am I doing here? Are you sure you need me? I remember having a conversation with him when I first started, and I sort of said, Peter, just so you know, I'm not at capacity. I'm used to working like 6 a.m. till 10 p.m. If you need me to be doing more, I can be doing more. Let me show you what I can do, kind of thing. And he said, Jess, like we want you to be at 70, 80% capacity on a regular day, because in those times when it gets busier, and those times will come when there'll be a lot going on, that way you'll have the capacity for when times get busy, and then things aren't going to be getting dropped. You're not going to be burnt out by the time we hit that point. We'll still be able to deliver that level of excellence. So yeah, I know you're not at 100% capacity every single day. That's what we want. Which was just such a shock to me, from going to feeling like, to be adding a contribution to that company, you needed to be working as many hours as possible, doing as many things as possible, to then coming into TAP and realizing that the contribution I can make is by doing an excellent job of of the things that I'm doing, but without having to necessarily be busy and crazy and running around at all times.
And it's that busy for busy's sake that so many people fall into the trap of thinking. I find so many assistants assign their value and their intrinsic value to their busyness.
Completely. And that's exactly what it was. I was in this role thinking, well, if I'm not knocking on the door, telling you when to come out of a meeting, or, having to book 100 different things and more meetings than we can possibly fit in a week, and then finding a way to juggle those and miraculously making it happen, and pulling out all these miracles, how am I really that valuable to this company? So it was great to be able to have that conversation with Peter and say, am I doing what you're expecting? And he said, absolutely. And in fact, you can take a breath knowing that you're contributing what you need to be contributing without having to look busy to feel that you're making a contribution.
Fantastic.
So, yeah, it was such a shift. It was a real eye-opener coming into this company off the back of startup life.
Sounds like a massive adjustment.
It absolutely was. And so I guess then how it progressed from there. So as I said, now I'm working in operations manager role. And so it was a gradual kind of progression in terms of just doing a great job in that EA role and just, wanting to do a really good job at what I was doing there. And then starting to look for the opportunities to, learn and grow. And we often say here at TAP, go to the problem. And that feels like kind of what it was, of seeing the opportunities where there is a gap to be filled and seeing if, my skills apply in those situations. So one thing that was really helpful in providing those opportunities, Peter launched not long after I started his digital app called Enixa.
Enixa.
Yes, exactly. And so that, what we do at TAP, we work with kind of the top 10 leaders or so in these really large companies for quite long-term transformation. And so when we were getting inquiries from, smaller teams and smaller groups, we only work with 10 clients at a time in TAP. So we just didn't have the capacity. It's not what it's built for. There just wasn't a space for those smaller teams and kind of giving leadership really to everyone. It was like leadership for a certain few.
It's so interesting, because when I was talking to Peter, I actually said that I feel like Enixa is in the same way as Canva has made graphic design available to everyone. I feel like that's what Enixa is doing. It's democratizing leadership development.
That's exactly
and it's
right.
such a wonderful, I cannot speak highly enough of it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I'm glad it's come across that way, because that's exactly what it was, So then Enixa launched not long after I'd started, and it really I was amazed that everything that we do at TAP was really made available through this app. But at the same time, it was a great platform then, because, TAP has been around for 20 plus years. And so it's very established. We know kind of how that works. And then suddenly there's Enixa, and we've got all these new ways of figuring out how are we launching it with clients, how are we using it, how is the public responding to it, how are we promoting it on social media. There was just so many other avenues, and it was just such a great opportunity that I'd had a chance to build that trust with Peter, that he was comfortable to lean on me for certain things, and really gave me that confidence. I was working on things like technical details that I wouldn't have thought I would be able to wrap my head around, but working with the developers on those. So there was just so many avenues that I was able to lean into and really just try and sink my teeth into. And that's how it's kind of evolved, of just going to where the problem is and applying my skills there.
I love that expression, going to where the problem is. Tell me more about that. Tell me more about what that actually, so for an EA or an assistant or an admin professional that's listening, what does that look like?
Yeah, it's funny. It's actually a saying that we kind of have here at TAP and would use with our clients, go to the problem, and that's where you're going to be able to have the greatest impact and make the biggest contribution. And so it's just something that's kind of stuck with me. that I feel applies to how I approach my work. And so I guess from an EA perspective, we've got the kind of expected and, day job. I know no 2 days are the same, but we've got the kind of day job tasks, but then there's always something else going on. You're at the center of things, what's happening, and you can see where there's a need and where there's a gap. And I think it's just having the confidence to go to that problem and make the biggest contribution that you can make, putting your hand up and saying, I think I can help in this situation, or what if we tried this, rather than kind of holding back and saying, no, not my job, not my problem.
Yeah.
Just seeing where you can make the contribution and going towards that rather than shying away.
I love it. It's really reminding me of in my training, I've been referencing a lot the Liz Wiseman book, Impact Players, for assistance to see the difference between a contributor mindset and an impact player mindset. And that's very much what you're articulating there, that impact player mindset. I really love that. So in terms of where you are now, so you're the operations manager.
Yeah.
And have you handed over the EA role for Peter to someone else?
So no, I haven't. I'll still do small bits and pieces for him on that EA side of things. But the way that we've worked, it's down to a bit of a fine art on that side of things. So it just takes such a small amount of my time, and it's such a small part of the role that there's not really a need to fill that at this stage. But yeah, now I'm into more things like I'm working more directly with clients and that client management piece. As I said, the technical side of things and liaising with the team that has built, we actually rebuilt the entire app over the past year. So there's a brand new version of Enixa that's just come out earlier this year. And so I
absolutely love. Oh,
excellent. Yeah, we tried to make it a lot more user-friendly. So it was just a lot of project management around that. And then kind of the security side of things. So it's just a bit of everything. And then, as I said, I'm working across really everything that Peter does. So across that consulting side with Enixa, and then any speaking engagements he's working in, I'll help, across the range of things, even to the extent that for certain clients, if he's doing a speaking engagement with them, I might start and get a couple of the ideas going and say, I think this is probably the direction you want to go. And he'll say, yeah, that's great, and scribble things down. I think one of the key things with Peter and I is just, not having any ego around it. So I feel comfortable to say, here's 10 ideas. And he'll say, yep, these 3 are great. No, don't need those 7 or whatever it is. And we don't waste any time in, well, why not? What didn't you like about it? It's easy to move quite quickly and to be able to have that flexibility I can take a first crack at a lot of things now. Yeah. But I know how he's thinking. I know what questions he's going to have.
It's so interesting because I interviewed this wonderful assistant who she's an American, she's now a chief of staff, but her name's Hallie Warner, and she talks about working with her executive, where she described it as sort of like, they would communicate the 1 to 2 together. And then she would pick up the ball and run from like 3 to say 9. And then it would only be like the 9 to 10 part that she would need to re-engage. And it did happen to be a him in order to get it to completion. Yeah. Does that resonate with you in terms of the way you work with Peter?
Yeah, I love that. I really love that, that idea. I think the way it works with Peter, there is often times when he's very, very clear, and this is exactly what I'm after, and that I can go and do the steps I need to do and come back in that kind of framework, as you said. Other times, I think the contribution I can really make is getting something off the ground. Peter's like, this is what I want to do, go and get it started. And then it often becomes very clear of either, this is exactly what we want to be doing, let's keep running with that, or, oh, no, that's exactly what we don't want to do, now at least we know where we're going. So sometimes it is going from 0 to 3 and then saying, okay, are we on the right track, or was that not at all where we needed to go? So, but absolutely, I really like that.
But it also sounds like, in terms of your communication with Peter, you guys have very, like, you're very aligned. Sorry to use the pun from the alignment partnership, but you're very aligned in your communication. Did that take a lot of effort, or did that come naturally?
No, I think Peter's been a great help in building that clarity between us. I think I've always kind of looked for, what's the person that I'm working with? What are they really saying? What do they really need? What do they need from me? But it was funny coming to work with Peter, and he may have spoken with this when you guys spoke, but the kind of rule of thirds of what people expect. 1/3 they'll tell you, the other third they won't tell you, either because they think that you should know, or they're afraid to tell you. And then the other third is they're not even really sure what they want yet. They're not conscious of it. I expect he may have spoken about that.
Well, it's so interesting. He didn't speak to me about that in the interview, but because I have been on Enixa and I've done that module, I've actually been sharing that reality about expectations constantly now with people, with assistants, in terms of, I use this idea of communicating, clarifying the expectations with your leader, and this idea of only 1/3 of expectations are actually communicated. Then there's that third that are conscious but not articulated, and then there's that third that they're not even aware of. So I use this practice of getting assistants to do what I call the 3 Ps of clarifying the preferences, the priorities, and the pet peeves with their executive, in order to be able to get that 100% of expectations, as much as possible, out on the table.
Yeah, that's great. And I think a lot of times I would almost feel like I didn't want to take any extra time by asking too many questions. You have that feeling that you want to go and figure it out by yourself, but by asking just a couple of extra clarifying questions, you might help them realize something they didn't even know, and save you both so much time.
Love that. Love it. Thanks, Jess. That's fantastic wisdom.
Yeah, no, it's been a great learning for me from working with TAP. I know a couple of the questions we always go to is, what's the problem we're trying to solve? As we start going down a rabbit hole of, trying to find solutions, but let's come back to what's the problem we're actually trying to solve here, and that often helps clear things up. Or if I'm not too sure, I might say to Peter, so what does excellence look like? Again, these are all questions that he's thrown at me across the years. And so now I'm in the habit of, I them right back to him.
I know he loves that.
That's it. If he's given me something and I'm like, what are you talking about? So what would excellence look like? And we'll have the look of, you're using my own tricks on me.
That is excellent. So in terms of protecting his time and energy, so we've already talked about the fact that you are the person that, I have real life experience of engaging with you in that conversation via LinkedIn, where you were very clear on, thanks, Liz, for your interest. Can you just communicate, give me some information about what would be the expectation you would have of Peter, what would be required, what would be the value to him of investing the time. So is that the way? Tell me how you protect his time and energy in a more broad sense.
Yeah, I think that's exactly, you got a first-hand experience of exactly, that's very much what I'll do for most opportunities that come in across the range of services that he works across. And I think the thing I'm looking for, again, it's another kind of TAP framing, is a values and value alignment. in terms of making sure the people that we're working with have that values alignment. You know, are we speaking the same language? Are the interactions nice and easy? Do we want the same things? But then also really importantly, a value alignment. You know, sometimes it is hard when you've got opportunities coming in. Everything seems like a good idea. You want to do everything, but if there's not a value for both sides, it's not going to be the best use of everyone's time. So that's, I guess, at a high level, I'm thinking, is it values and value alignment? And then I just get super curious and really dive into all the questions of how can I, you know, really understand what exactly is the ask, you know, what's the time commitment, what is the value that we're looking for here from both sides, so that when I take that to Peter, I've got the answers. You know, I've got in my head the questions that he's going to be asking me, so I can come prepared to him and we can have one conversation. We know exactly where we're going with it, rather than having to go back and forth and clarify, and what do they really mean? And, oh, this isn't what we expected. And now we've said yes to something that's taking us down a path that's not helpful. So it's just getting really, really curious, I think really helps to get us off on the right foot.
Jess, honestly, you're giving my listeners a masterclass in what it means to have that strategic hat on and be that big picture thinker. Thank you so much, because you have just articulated so beautifully all of the things that I talk about in terms of the fact that as an assistant, obviously you need to be incredibly tactical, but the value that you can bring in stepping into that linchpin zone is that big picture thinking and that strategic thinking. And I often use the what if question. So, you know, when something is being asked of you or of your leader, asking what if, because, you know, if you were to say, you know, to start engaging with somebody, whether it's something like what Peter and I did together, or something, you know, more big, you know, consulting engagement type situation, asking that what if question of, well, what if the values and the value are not aligned? What if Peter asks, what is your understanding of that alignment? And you can't answer that question, then you're not delivering value. You know, keep repeating that word value. That's not you being that linchpin assistant.
Yeah, that's it. And there's certainly times when, you know, you are conscious. It's a lot more natural for me now, but when I first started honing the skill of understanding what it has, that values and value alignment, you know, I'd be asking all these questions thinking, I don't want to take too much of this person's time or feel like I'm wasting their time. But at the end of the day, we're going to get to either a go or no go so much quicker, rather than if I had to call them back and ask 20 questions or directed them to the wrong pathway. So, you know, you are conscious, I don't want to take their time, but it's so much easier to ask some clarifying questions right up front and get what you need, than to not have that in the first place.
Yeah, and I can attest to the fact that your clarifying questions, I may even do I may even do a screenshot of your messages and post them as an example of great clarifying questions, open-ended questions that, you know, were so, clear, concise, but, you know, specific, to get that information to help you know whether or not this was something to take forward.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, seeing your name pop up, I'm a bit biased. I thought, this is one I'd love for Peter to do. So, when I get all the answers back and I'm able to just go tick, 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 I was like, great, I can take this one through confidently.
Well, look, I mean, honestly, I feel so privileged. And I said that to Peter, you know, when I was interviewing him, that, you know, to be able to expose my listeners to somebody of his caliber, you know, it means so much to me in terms of the value that I'm bringing to them. But to be able to do it in partnership with bringing them you just amplifies that value, because they're seeing, you know, and I hope listeners, my lovely listeners, are actually seeing that this is actually what I'm all about. This is the sort of nirvana, and I'm sure it's not perfect all the time. Let's not be, you know, Pollyanna about it. I'm sure you guys have your good and bad days, but it's this is the idea of what I talk about in terms of assistance, using those supercharged soft skills, those power skills, to be able to propel themselves into that linchpin zone. And then as a result, you're getting this opportunity to stretch yourself and develop new skills and capabilities in terms of, you know, project managing and leading, being the, you know, operations manager for the Enixa side of things, which, you know, I think is just going to be, you know, just is such a wonderful, you know, testimony to your contribution.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it is, it's funny reflecting back. I have so many days where I kind of pinch myself and think, I'm so excited by the work I get to do. And as I said before, the people that we're working with, and, you know, I have felt the impact. Like I say, so many of the things I'm talking about are very tap influenced. And as you said, you found it all in Enixa. And I just think, you know, if I'd lent into, I've got to be busy at all times to have an impact, I wouldn't have the headspace to think strategically about these things. And I wouldn't have been able to kind of settle and ask the questions I need to ask if I'm just trying to churn through everything so quickly. So no, I absolutely have those days where I pinch myself and I'm thinking, wow, isn't it cool that I get to do such a range of things and at the level that I'm working at now? It's unbelievable.
Yeah. So in terms of advice that you would have for other assistants, I mean, number one is, you know, I'm going to keep banging on about the fact that they need to sign up for their 30-day free trial of Enixa. That's, by the time this podcast comes out, will that still be available?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. There'll be a 30-day free trial. So
and I'm encouraging assistants, my listeners, to bring Enixa to their leaders, to introduce them to Enixa, because I have listeners all around the world. So, you know, I cannot, you know, recommend highly enough that it's a great resource to introduce to your organisations as a potential self-directed leadership development, you know, program. But what other advice would you have for assistants?
Yes, well, as you said, yeah, you know, Enixa is a great resource. It's all kind of in there. I think the biggest piece of advice that I have is to just kind of back yourself and trust yourself, and put yourself out there for opportunities. As I kind of said, see where you can contribute your skills to make an impact. One thing that's been really helpful in this role, as I said, I'm so lucky to work with Peter, that he is, you know, really practices what he preaches. He is such a great manager and leader to work with. But a big thing for me in this role has been kind of letting go of any ego, so that I can, you know, have a go at certain new opportunities, or take something to Peter, and if he says, no, that's wrong, I don't waste any time kind of thinking, oh no, he said it's wrong and now I'm embarrassed, or I can't believe he didn't think that was a good idea. You just kind of let go of that ego and that fear, so that you can just focus on contributing and growing and learning yourself.
Yeah.
Without having to then spend any extra energy on that head noise around, you know, oh, why didn't that work out? How embarrassing. Last time I'm doing that. So really kind of trust yourself and then let go of the rest.
That's great. That's really great advice, because that, you know, it's interesting because you used the word confidence a couple of times, and it was in an episode I interviewed this European lady a month or so ago, and she actually told me that the word confidence, the Latin root of confidence is fidere, which means to trust yourself. And I loved that. And that really is, you're really articulating that. If you remove the ego from it, it means that you can continue to have the confidence to trust yourself to keep bringing these ideas forward, because you are a very capable, linchpin assistant. But if you take the ego out of it, it's not going to get in the way of you trusting yourself that you will continue to have those great ideas and those great potential contributions to make.
Yeah, and that's it. And then Peter can give me feedback as well, and I can have all the wisdom of his years. He's comfortable to give me that feedback, knowing that it's not going to result in me taking 3 days to, of quiet time where I'm just not comfortable to say anything anymore.
Yeah.
So he's happy to then give me that feedback, and I can take that on board, and we can move really quick from there.
That's fantastic. Well, final question is there a resource that you would like to share with my lovely listeners?
I mean, no surprises, but it's going... I would definitely, jokes aside, I would definitely recommend that they jump on. There is that 30-day free trial. If you head into the content section, you'll see a whole bunch of modules.
Yeah.
And you can do the content in any order, but it really is so many lessons in there that and it won't all happen at once. There's a big one for me was, letting go of perfectionism. And that's not something that it's going to happen overnight. I kind of went from rereading my emails 7 times before I sent them to rereading them only 3 times before I sent them. So it's baby steps, it's 2% changes, but I would definitely recommend it. It's really everything that we do with, that Peter's doing with CEOs, that we're doing with the C-suite executives that we work with at TAP. All of that learning is in Enixa. So I would say, jump in and have a look and see what you think.
And I would second that. And I said in the conversation with Peter that the thing that I love, I love so many things about Enixa, but what I really found different about it to other learning platforms is before you can move on to the next module, you need to answer some self-reflection questions, which really forces you to be, the top of my 5 levels of mastery is that self-insight. And that's one of the things that I really love about Enixa. And in 30 days, if all you want to do is do the 30-day free trial, you are going to get so much value out of it. I'm so, totally second that as a resource to share. So thanks, Jess.
Yeah, thank you. And that's it. Those reflection questions are really helpful because there'll be so much. I know this content like the back of my hand now, and I'll come back and look at it and go, oh, I know it, but have I actually been putting it into place? And if I'm really honest with myself, have I been doing it, or have I just been thinking about it and intending to do it? So no, absolutely would encourage to do questions.
And I think the other thing that you've beautifully summed up is like one of the sort of catchphrases that my listeners know that I'm a really strong proponent of is the idea of progress, not perfection. And that, every step we take in learning, in developing ourselves is a step in the right direction. And it might be 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but we're still moving forward. And, it's progress over perfection. So, it's a fantastic way to do that. So, and listening to you is a fantastic way to hear those, to hear from somebody who's done exactly that and continues to do that. So thank you so much. Is there anything else that you want to share with the listeners before we finish off?
No, I just thank you so much, Liz, for taking the time. It's actually beautiful to have a moment like this where I can kind of look back at the past few years, because exactly like you said, it's small things and it's little changes and small growth each year. But then to actually look back now and have a moment to really appreciate how much everything has changed and the things that I get to work on now, it's just been really, really nice to take that time. And thank you so much for the opportunity to have the conversation. It's been lovely chatting with you.
It's my absolute pleasure. And honestly, I could not be, more delighted that when I was talking to Peter, he was the one that said, I don't know why you're talking to me. You should be talking to Jess. And I was like, well, I will be talking to Jess. I'm going to be talking to Jess.
We'll make it happen.
Let's make that happen. So I'm really grateful I'm grateful to you for, facilitating me to have the conversation that I had with Peter. And I'm grateful to him for facilitating the opportunity to have a conversation with you. So thank you to both of you. And I wish you both continued success within TAP and within Enixa, with the growth and scaling of Enixa, and dominating the world. That's what I want to see.
That's exactly right. Thank you so much, Liz.
So Jess, if listeners want to get in touch with and connect with you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
So they can connect via LinkedIn or pop me an email. My TAP email address is jessicadavies@tap.net.au. So feel free to reach out anytime. I'd be happy to have extra conversations or clarify anything that we've spoken about today.
Fantastic. Well, I'll make sure I put those links in the show notes so people will be able to connect with you, which I am in no doubt you will be getting LinkedIn requests at least.
Looking forward to it.
Thanks, Jess. It was lovely to speak to you. Thank you so much for giving me your valuable time.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's show. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to see the show notes, head over to my website. It would be great if you haven't already done so. If you enjoyed the show, if you could kindly go to iTunes and leave a review. It helps other people find the show. Thanks for listening and have a great week.